Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is John Tabor at UDS. Thank you for joining us today. I see Jessica, Keith, and Mark are on, and hopefully we'll get a couple more participants to join in, but if not, that's a small, intimate group, and I'm fine with that. Today we're going to talk about leasing a little bit. So let's get started. You know, times have changed. There's a lot more leasing happening than ever before. Certainly customers are more prepared, they're more aware of what's going on in our space, and many people are ready to lease, they're open to it more than ever before. I'm going to kind of throw out some questions to the group. I prepared some questions. I just want to see what you think about these, and I'd like you to try to answer them, and that way we can talk about it. First question is, on average, lease payments are blank lower than typical finance. Anybody have? So I'd like to see what you think are the answers here yet. I see nobody's voted, but there we go. Somebody voted. Thank you. We'll wait a little bit to see what it is. Right now, we've got one person thinking it's $79. I don't know who you are, but $79. It actually is higher than that. It's $120. And on some trucks and SUVs, it's as high as $206 less per month, comparing a comparable lease to a finance term. Big difference. Another question for you, let's see, is which demographic leases more as a percentage? Would you say it's the millennials, baby boomers, Gen X, empty nesters? Let's see what y'all think about that one. Just waiting for everybody to vote and what they think. Millennials, baby boomers, Gen X, or empty nesters? Haven't got anybody to click in yet. There we go. Somebody's picked the baby boomers, which is a pretty good choice. Anybody else? Well, actually, this may surprise you, but the largest growing group is millennials. On the next slide, we'll get into a little bit more about that, but the millennials are the fastest growing demographic by percentage of turning to leasing. So some interesting information there. Might not have been what we thought. Another question is, in the past 5 years, lease volume has grown at what percent? Think about it. Over the last 5 years, has it grown 37%, 41%, 69%, or 91%? I'd be interested to see what you think. So how much is lease growing? Anybody vote yet? Well, whoever hit 91% is correct. That's an amazing statistic. Over the last 5 years, it's grown 91% and continues to grow. And then our last question really is going to be, is an interesting one, is what percentage of lease turn-in vehicles currently have the leasee having an out-of-pocket expense at lease turn-in? What percentage of lease turn-in vehicles have the leasee have an out-of-pocket expense at lease turn-in? Anybody? Somebody's gifted today, or it is 50%. It's the first time, as a matter of fact, that number has been obtained. Statistics from the country's largest inspection service. This year, 2017, was the first year they went over 50%, which is a great statistic for us, because when you think about it, that means that if somebody's leased before, then they've had some out-of-pocket expense when it comes to a lease. So just something to keep in mind. Here's the statistics that I got that information from, and you know, if you're interested in this kind of thing, it's pretty straightforward. Edmunds put it out, and it's just information you can get online provided by Edmunds that gives you a lot of these statistics. A couple of things that are pretty interesting, though, when you look at it, is I did do some research. This is a little bit old, but in 2017, it went up another 500,000. So we're fast approaching 5 million leases when it comes to new car sales. So that's a lot, and it just continues to grow. So, and the other thing is that if you look at the millennial play there, and which is even more interesting, is millennials are really coming to understand leasing and want to do it, and that makes sense because they're early adopters of technology when it comes to things like phones and those types of things. They want to move on from it quicker. They're used to upgrading phones at a relatively quick pace and updating technology, and so that it makes sense that cars would fit right into it. They don't want to own, they just want to use. So leasing provides that to them. They're used to subscriptions like Netflix and different things like that. So it makes sense to them. Leasing is something that I think we should be, certainly if we have a millennial sitting in front of us, we should be presenting leasing and looking for it as an alternative to finance, or if you have a cash buyer in front of you. But some interesting statistics. So let's move on. Selling products on leases and rocket science, it's logical. We always talk about closing with logic, but I want to talk about product sales on leasing a little bit. And we talk about, what are your 4 responsibilities of the leasee? Obviously, make the payments, maintain it, have insurance on it, and return it in satisfactory condition. Well, based on the statistics that we were just looking at, it makes a lot of sense to start thinking about how we handle this a little bit differently. For instance, like our interview. If we know that the customer is going to be leasing, we need to incorporate a little bit of change into our interview, and we need to ask questions like, is this your first time leasing, or have you leased before? And it doesn't matter how the question is answered. We just want to say, I really like the convenience and the hassle-free aspect of leasing, don't you? And what that does is it kind of plants a little bit of a seed for what I want to use later when I'm in the close or when I'm presenting products. Because when you think about it, one of the things that most customers will say, and our data shows that when asked why customers lease, 2 things come out. One, payment, and the other is convenience of the lease, and that it's easier for them. They think about it that way. So, those are the questions we want to ask. Did the salesperson go over your responsibilities under the term of the lease? If you don't mind, I think I'd like to go over them. I think it'd be a good idea to go over them with you. As your lease agreement, it states your lease vehicle must be returned in good condition, allowing for normal wear and tear. Well, excess wear and tear to your vehicle outside the normal wear and tear guidelines probably will and certainly could result in an unexpected excess wear and tear charges. And how we can use that is right on the back of the lease contract is an opportunity, is a great place to point that out. And right there on the back of every lease contract, it states right there where it talks about excess wear and tear. And we want to use this as a tool. And then I've included here just a script that you can be using with your lease customers to review that. See, we've picked up a couple of participants, so thanks for joining, Rob. I appreciate it. And Dean, it's good to have you on. Let's keep going. Now, as we talked about in the interview, we're talking about complementing, completing, and enhancing the lease experience. When we get into product sales, as with any customer, we should be presenting a menu. We just structure it a little bit differently based on the lease customer. But when you think about it, the products that we have to offer, like excess wear and tear, maintenance, tire and wheel, fabric and paint, dent removal, theft, and key replacement, all apply to leasing as well, if not better, than they do to a finance purchase. Because if the number one reason people like to lease is based on a payment, or the convenience and hassle-free aspect of leasing, then this even makes it better. You'll complement, complete, and enhance the lease experience, and we need to put those words into our presentations and set up our menu just like we do on a finance customer with a preferred option based on what we talked about. One of the things that you see here is a bundled product, and a bundled product can be something like the Premier Care Plus. You know, I don't see a lot of that when I'm working on the leaderboards. I don't see a lot of people selling Premier Care Plus. But bundled products are a good option to consider. And the reason they are is because customers today, especially millennials, but most customers are starting to buy things in bundles. You know, you can't go into a phone store and try to get a phone changed without them wanting to sell you cable television, security system, and a phone system. And if you bundle all those together, you get a deal. You can't go into any restaurant without getting a bundle, except they call them meals. You know, well, if you get the soda and the fries, you know, you get a better deal on it. So people are starting to understand and adopt and accept bundles much better than they have in the past. So don't, you know, rule out the bundled products like the Premier Care. Any chance we have an opportunity to do that, we should with our customers. So let's talk about conversions for a minute. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of cash buyers, probably more than we've ever seen, or at least I remember in recent memory. And I hear that from a lot of F&I managers, and we talk about conversions. And just so you know, next month we will be talking about conversions and converting cash customers. But I just want to talk about it briefly as it pertains to leasing and what we should be doing. Oops, sorry about that. You know, the biggest thing is, why should you pay cash for the whole vehicle if you don't have to? And that's really what we want to talk to our customers about who are considering paying cash, is converting them to a lease. We'll talk about finance next month, but as it pertains to a lease, you know, this is just a script that I've used, and it's after consideration. Many of the customers have usually paid cash in the past have decided to lease instead. Let me share with you why so many have decided to go with a lease recently, and remind them of why paying cash is not necessarily a good idea, and that they do have options. And with the market the way it's performing, you know, paying cash for a car, especially a new car, just really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But if we're going to do it, we have to be willing and ready to show them the math. Anytime you're trying to convert, you can talk all you want to about it, but you got to put it down on paper and show it to them. And that's pretty simple when it comes to leasing right now. Considering, and this is just an example of a $35,000 selling price. Yeah, I may have left a couple of things out, but for our webinar here, this is a pretty good example. Using $35,000, usually there's an incentive, added incentive for a lease product. As you can see, some of the benefits, the sales tax, you're only paying half of the sales tax because you pay tax on the payment, not on the whole amount. So the $936, which is 36 months of tax, comes to $936 versus the $2,100 on a purchase. The documentation fee is also included. Tax and tag are also included in there. But on a cash purchase, you're looking at $36,520, and on a lease purchase, you're looking at $16,540. And then I've used a 55% residual for $20,625. When you add those two together and subtract them, you're looking at only about a $645 difference. So think about that. For $645 more, you could have the option to only pay for the amount of vehicle you're going to use for 3 years or 36 months, and then you have an option to complete the purchase at the end of those 3 years if that's what you decide to want to do, or go into a new car, and that's only going to cost you $645. But wait, it gets better. If you take that $20,625 that you have in cash that you were just about to give me and put it in into the market or into an investment, you can do better. You know, I just did some quick calculations at 5%, investing that $20,000, you're going to do about $1,050 a year. At 6%, it's almost $1,250. And at 8%, that's $1,650, and that's just for 1 year. So if, Mr. Customer, if you were to go 3 years on each one of those options, and I don't know what you can get on your money, somewhere between 5 and 8, I'd guess, maybe even more. But at 5% over 3 years, that's $3,150. 6%, it's $3,700, and 8%, it's almost $5,000. So the idea of paying cash, and if you were to give me that money, that 36, if you said, John, I'm an investment broker, and you hand me $36,000, and I tell you, oh, guess what? The first year I'm gonna lose about 20-25% of that. You probably wouldn't give it to me, but that's what's happening with the new car purchase. So this gives you an option. So a couple of highlights there is that you get a little bit more on the rebate. Doc is included, and the payment difference between the two is a big payment, and that investment income that we can make on the cash plus be liquid if we would need to just makes sense on a lease. It's almost it's a logical close, but you have to show it to them on paper. You can't just talk about this. Next, what are some of the other benefits that we can share? Certainly a one-pay option for cash conversions makes a lot of sense to people. It's just like paying cash, except you're only paying half of it. And you can write one check and be done. You're only paying for what you use. You all remember that. Maintenance expense could be lower because you're going to be changing vehicles. You could be changing vehicles when most people are changing tires. Certainly limits market risk. One thing that comes to mind is there's a certain German vehicle. I don't know if you remember this, but it was a few years ago that had a little bit of a problem, and it kept jumping out of park. And the manufacturer was being sued because people were driving through the end of their garage by accident. And when naturally that hit the national news, and when it did, the value of that particular vehicle when it came in on trade was much lower than it could have been. The people that leased it ended up doing pretty well. The people that bought it, not so much. So it does limit market risk. You don't have to absorb the full depreciation. That's another, obviously you can see how it goes and see if the factory's calculated that depreciation correctly. You don't own the car, the leasing company does. And why is that a benefit? Well, I was listening to someone talk about earners, people that have two high-income earners in a family, and how to limit the risk of not having your house in both names, things like that, and splitting the risk between two people, not doing everything in both your names. And one of the things that was mentioned in the podcast was leasing, and the fact that when you're leasing, if you were to be involved in a car accident and sued, they're going to go after everything that is in your name. So some things should be, you want to split that risk. And as you know, the customer doesn't own the car, the leasing car company does. So if they're sued, any good attorney would also sue the person who owns the car, which is whatever manufacturer it is. And if I'm being sued, I'd love to have somebody with those kind of deep pockets standing next to me as I'm defending my case. So it's a good, just limits the risk a little bit. There can be some tax benefits depending on how the vehicle's used. Certainly there's tax benefit at the beginning of the lease, but if I'm using the vehicle for business in some way, there may be some tax benefits available. Again, even if we straight out convert somebody from cash, we still need to do a menu and show them the benefits of the products that we offer that really complement, complete, and enhance the lease experience. And I've got them listed there again for you. So some takeaways from today's webinar. Lease is growing and continues to grow. I don't know, but for those of you that are in the Crown organization that are listening, I think everybody on the call today is Crown, I'm not sure. Acura store here in town was, right up until the last 2 days of the month, they were at 100% lease penetration on new. And I'd never come across that before, so I made some calls after I talked to Dan and found out that that's not as unusual as I thought it was, and that there are some stores that are fast approaching 100% lease penetration, which means we probably need to get better at selling products on lease. Millennials would rather lease than own, no question about it. All the data tells us that. So anybody in front of us, it's always, you know, if they're in the millennial demographic, we should be talking to them about lease. We want to make sure that we review the responsibilities that every leasee has under their lease, and we want to make sure that they know those and incorporate that into our presentation every time. And it's important that we, you know, ask that question: is this your first time leasing? Have you leased before? Really, you know, and then say, great, I really like the convenience and hassle-free aspect of leasing, don't you? So we want to review that every time with every customer. If they've leased before, chances are they have some out-of-pocket expense at turn-in. That's why we ask that question. And if they've had some out-of-pocket expense at lease turn-in, they're going to be much more open-minded to what we're talking about or the products that we have to offer. So make sure that we find that out in the interview. And if they have, they're going to listen when it comes to saving them money at the end of the lease. Use logic when you're closing on products all the time, but especially on a lease. It's logical. Remember, complement, complete, and enhance. And then the old-fashioned pen and paper for the customer so they can visualize what you're talking about from a financial benefit of converting. You know, we have that guy that, you know, is never going to, you know, I just pay cash, I always pay cash. And, you know, we want to say, well, we've had a lot of people just like you come in, and lately they're starting to not be like you. And let me explain to you why. And then convenience is a big factor. Keep talking about that. The statistics and the data show that besides payment, convenience is the reason people are starting to lease more and more. That's why subscription services and things like that are being tried, because people want to pay for what they use. They don't necessarily want to own. So with that said, I'll open it up to any questions if anybody has any questions of any kind. Nobody usually does, but I thought I'd ask, or have any ideas they'd like to share. I can see that nobody's got me on their screen right now. So with that, I will say thank you for joining in. Don't forget, next month it'll be centered only on cash. We'll be talking about cash conversions and credit union conversions. And if you're interested in anything that we talked about today, feel free to email me at jtabor@udsdealerservices.com. Or if you have a question that you just didn't want to ask in front of the group, I'd be glad to help you with it. Either way, thanks for joining us today, and have a great day.